I feel like I need to do something at the start here because, how many of you have gone by a car lot and you've seen one of those things that kind of wave in the wind? If you look at it, you're going to go to great. I kind of look like one of those things, just like everywhere, And I don't know, maybe it's a spirit animal. I'm not sure, But there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now with camp and VBS, all these different things that are going on in student ministry, and I'm kind of that thing out in the front. It gets all the attention. The only problem, it doesn't really sell a lot of cars and I actually do a lot of the work. That's not true, I do work, that's a joke. But here's the deal, there's a lot of people that support those ministries. There were sponsors that went to camp with us this week who gave up their work time, gave up their vacation time to hang out with kids who are sweaty and stinky and yell a lot. And those people need to be applauded because their service was incredible this week. With the VBS, how stupid is it for a student minister to be hey, we're going to put camp and VBS back to back. That'll be smart. No, that's a dumb idea. But there was so many people who have lifted my hands and said, no, let me handle decor. I did none of the decor. I have no, so if you look over there Raj, you did so good. No, it wasn't me at all. There were people in this room and in this ministry who have stepped up and served in a really unbelievable way. So from my heart, I say thank you. Because I cannot do this ministry without you, and I am so grateful for the way that you support our teenagers and our children. It's very special. So, and on the lines of camp, camp is not for everybody. There's a couple different opinions. Have you ever been to camp? You just sighed a little bit in your heart, you remember what it's like to be that tired. And if you've never been to camp, you kind of there may be impressions what camp? Didn't you went on vacation and you swam, Raj? What are you doing? It's people all the time how was camp? That's kind of the question. How was camp? And I was trying to figure out how to describe it to them. I remember when Joe and I went on our honeymoon, we went to Cancun, and it was beautiful, and there were beaches, and every night they had a certain thing that they did. They'd come into your room, and they called it a turn-down service. So they'd unmake your bed, which I didn't even make it. I don't know how it got made, but they'd unmake your bed. They set a little chocolate on the thing, and they'd get you, if you ordered room service, they'd be waiting for you. It's turn-down service. Literally, no job. The theme of camp is never turn down. Literally, never turn down. That's the theme of camp. So I created my own theme. I call it, you've heard of SOS, Save Our Ship. I created a new thing. It's something over sleep. That's what camp is. So it doesn't matter what it is. It could be students over sleep, could be screaming over sleep, could be singing over sleep, sports over sleep. I don't care what it is. Swimming is what are we doing right now? We're doing something and I'm not sleeping. That's what's going on right now. That's how camp was. We did a lot of crazy things at camp this week, and I think we brought some pictures. One of the things we did, we had a lake day. So we took the students out on Lake Talua or whatever it's called, huge lake, lots of fun, wakeboarding. Dakota showed everybody he's a professional wakeboarder, and that was cool, and then tubing, all this stuff. You have never lived until you've seen students that you are responsible for literally skipping across the lake after falling off a tube. I think I brought a clip of it here. This is incredible. This is Karsten and Hunter. Watch this. This is amazing. I think I filmed that, and then I just watched it 25 times repetitively. It was amazing. It was amazing. I had a lot of fun. The other day they had all these random activities that you had to do. And so one of the days they had a swimming, a little pond that you went down to, and we played. This was, if you hate fear and danger, don't listen to this part. It wasn't true. And so we played a game called watermelon rugby. Watermelon's very safe, rugby not very safe. If you put them together, incredibly dangerous. And so what they did is they had kind of do we have pictures of this? I think we do. So we had kind of, there's Ian dominating. So what they did, it's easy to hold a watermelon normally, but except they covered in Vaseline. So now you got a Vaseline covered watermelon. You have two groups. Go to the next picture. You got two groups of teams here, and we were kind of built for this game. We dominated. I'll just be honest with you. Basically, it was just watermelons, and then trucking a whole bunch of people. It was amazing. I think my favorite was Kennedy. She would come up to me. Kennedy, she's so sweet and tender. She would literally she'd kind of sneak up on people, the little boys, she'd be bah! And just run over there. And it was awesome because every time I'm playing the game, and she would come find me and tell me she just wrecked somebody. She was hey, I just killed that kid. It was amazing. It's amazing. There's Jeff, the Viking with the wet beard. It's beautiful. So, great fun. Great fun. But we had a lot of crazy things happen at camp. But here's what camp is about. Oh yeah, I forgot about the paint. They're throwing paint everywhere that night. So I didn't get involved in that. I don't like paint or screaming. So I stayed away from that. We had a lot of fun things happen. A lot of crazy things happen. But can I tell you also, there was a lot of spiritual victories that happened. We didn't just dominate watermelon rugby or whatever it was called. Like God moved this week. It was beautiful to see some of the things that happened, to see students who a few days before were literally closed off to the entire world stand up in front of their peers and strangers and go, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. This is where my heart's at right now. It was awesome to see that same group of kids where in any group of young people you can have all sorts of cliques and backbiting, to see them literally locking arms in worship singing the song we just sang. Beautiful. And you know what it did? It caused me to ask the question. Let's celebrate the victories, but celebrate the spiritual things that God did this week. But wait a second, time out. What changed? Camp is cool and camp is fun, but literally, we were at camp, we showed up Monday night, we left Friday morning. You're telling me that in less than 4 days, students who were closed off to other people in the room were now standing very vulnerable before all of them. You're telling me that the same student who was unwilling to step into even a minuscule leadership role with anything spiritual was now calling other students to prayer. You're going to tell me that in 4 days, a student that was hiding and withdrawn is now going to be like, hey, I want Jesus. I want Jesus. And I asked the question, and it's a good question to ask, what was the difference? Because none of the kids that we took are absent from church. It wasn't like, oh, now we're getting a church message. No, they all go to church. Arguably, they all have good families who care about them and love them. So what was the change? How did we go from closed off, rejected, not thinking about God at all, to completely tender and broken before a Heavenly Father? How do we do that? And as I thought about it, I had some good discussions with Ivan and Pastor Bob and thinking about these things, and I determined it's what we've been talking about. The common denominator that changed during this week at camp was the community. You see, because even for 4 days, for 4 short days, these students experienced a type of community that allowed them to connect with God in a way that they never had before. That's why camp's so special. It's because camp is somewhat of a microcosm of what the church is supposed to be. We're going to look at Titus 2. You have a Bible open to Titus 2 today. And if you're familiar at all with the letter that Paul wrote to Titus, it's kind of ironic that I'm teaching it this morning, because Paul is writing to a young new preacher, and here's what he's doing. He's telling him what it looks like to step into that role. And so if you're familiar with Titus at all, you'll know Titus chapter 1, that he walks through the qualifications of what it takes to be a pastor. And he says, hey, husband of one wife, and not given to strong drink, and not a striker, not greedy of filthy, all these things. He's saying, hey, listen, okay, Titus, you want to step into this role? This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. And then in Titus 2, Paul says, hey, listen, here's the goal. Here's the goal. We understand this, right? Like we've all gotten a new job or maybe hired someone at a job. The first thing when I worked at Chick-fil-A, I did a lot of the interviewing and hiring process there. And so we would have multiple interviews. And the whole purpose of the interviews was to make sure first that they got the qualifications. And if they got the qualifications, then we moved on to a job description. So, okay, now you're going to work front of house, back of house. You're going to be doing prep. You're going to be in marketing. It didn't matter where. But then for each one, without question, we gave them a goal. Here's our goal. We had to memorize it. It says, our goal at Chick-fil-A, we develop leaders who mentor and reproduce other leaders that create raving fans while achieving profitability objectives. That was our goal. You had to memorize it. Literally, leadership in the store, if you didn't have it memorized, would make you go to the back and memorize it. It was the goal. It was ingrained into what we did. And so it didn't matter where you worked. It didn't matter if you worked front of house. You could look at the goal and go, okay, am I developing a leader here? Am I being a leader? Am I creating a raving fan? Is this experience amazing? Am I achieving profitability objectives in this moment? We knew if we were hitting the goal. This is what Paul's doing. Titus 1, he gives him the qualifications. Titus 2, he gives him the job description and the goal. Let's read it. Titus 2, verse 1. But speak thou the things which become sound doctrine. Pause. This would be a great note for another sermon, another time. This would be amazing. Literally he's saying, only speak things that are true. Only speak things that pertain to truth. We'll move on. Verse 2. That the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, in charity, in patience, that the aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Young men likewise exhort to be sober-minded in all things, showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech, that cannot be condemned, that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say of you. Exhort servants to be obedient unto their masters, and to please them well in all things, not answering again, not purloining, stealing, but showing good fidelity. Fidelity. Look what Paul's saying. So remember the context. Here's Paul writing to a young preacher saying, listen, this is the goal of a church. This is the goal of a ministry. And it's interesting what he doesn't say. It's interesting that he doesn't show up and say, hey, listen, the goal, Titus, pay attention. The goal is to get a lot of people in the church. Because if that was the goal, the list would look different, right? The list would be like, okay, so if you're going to get a lot of people in the church, if you're going to grow a big church, then here's the program you got to have, and you got to make sure you appeal to millennials because you know them, and they're taking selfies, and you got to have this group to get the kids involved and all these things. But the thing is, he doesn't do that. Now, don't get me wrong, I would love to see the church grow and blossom in numerical growth, but that's not the goal. It's not the goal. You'll notice that he doesn't even give them a set standards that they must adhere to. And everybody's got to walk this way and dress this way and got to make sure you look this way and don't do this and don't do that. He doesn't even give them that because that's not the goal. The goal is not to get a group of people to all look the same and talk the same. The goal that Paul is describing is community. And not just any community. Here's what I wrote down. The goal that Paul puts forth is, listen, authentic, intentional, biblical community among the generations. Authentic, intentional, biblical community among the generations. You want an answer to why camp was so impactful for our teenagers? That's it. For 4 days. Authentic, intentional, biblical community among the generations. And you know what Paul says? You know what God says to us? Church, that's the goal. That's the goal. So what does that goal look like? We mentioned the things briefly. Let's look at it more in depth. So if we're going to hit that goal, if we're going to make sure we're meeting the mark that Paul has set, first, community must be authentic. Authentic. Paul is calling us to an authentic community. Now, this is weird because if you look at the passage, Paul doesn't expressly state, hey, be real. Like, you got to be authentic. He doesn't expressly state that. I looked up the origin of the word authentic. It's an interesting word. It has auto, which means self, and then hentes, which means being. So literally, the word authentic, self-being. Can I break it down this way? Certified realness. Certified realness. And Paul's, remember, he's describing the goal of a community in a church. He's saying, listen, the first thing you got to have, you're going to be that community that God's called you to. You must have certified realness. You must be authentic. What's it look like? Certified. It checks out. It is what it claims to be. You ever got the baseball memorabilia? Dave had some stuff he was selling out here, and they all had a little sticker on them at the back. It said, certified authenticity. Literally, this checked out. This was actually signed by real Roy Williams. This was actually whatever. And this with artwork the same way. It's certified. It's authentic. Look at the passage that says, Titus 2:2, that the aged men be sober. That the aged women likewise, that they be in behavior. Titus 2 verse 7, and all things showing thyself a pattern of good works. You see, the problem a lot of times, the takeaway from our community is that we have a performance mindset. In that way, God's given us a list of things that I have to do. I got to love my spouse, love my neighbor, I got to be kind, I got to love people, try to give a tithe, and so then we just perform it. But it's not who we are. And Paul says, no, forget that. Forget that. The type of community that I want to see is authentic. It's certified. It actually checks out with God's standards, and that's not just what they do, that's actually who they are. Because here's the deal. Eventually, the mask comes off. I sent a text to our parents at the end of camp, and I said, listen, be warned. I said, your students have just experienced a week of real authenticity. I said, and if you show up on their doorstep and you're going to put on a fake look, it's going to be real easy to spot. That's how they train people to catch counterfeit money, right? They have them spend time with the real substance so they feel it, they know it, they taste it. And for 4 days, our students felt it and tasted it. And I can't imagine if they were honest and they could speak freely, which would be great in a good community, by the way. If they could speak freely, how many of them would have to point a finger and go, a little faking going on there? Not checking out, Dad. Certified. God has called us to authenticity. I went out to eat the other day with the Buchanans. They're out of town. They're not skipping. They're out of town. And their son Colton loves Halo. He loves the video game Halo. And I've played Halo in my life like maybe 4 times, 5 times, maybe. I know where the buttons are. I know how to throw a grenade, and I know how to get killed a lot. That's all I know about Halo. But Colton doesn't know that. So Colton's playing Halo, and I'm trying to make conversation with him. I'm a student pastor. I feel like I have to or something. I don't know, And so I'm talking about video games. We're having a good time. And so we're talking about this. Well, I just start making stuff up. And Colton goes, hey, I'm level 50. I was like, oh, only 50? That's too bad. I said, I'm like 67. He's like, you can't get 67. I said, no, you actually have to unlock it. It's a cheat code, and then you go through, and then you actually upgrade. You're completely invisible the whole game. It's really fun, and I'll murder you every time you play it. Colton thinks I'm amazing at Halo. Here's the deal. He's not here today, that's why I can share this story. What would give it away? If I picked up a controller. Mom and Dad, you want to know why you struggle with family devotions? Because you got to pick up the controller. Can we be a community that actually checks out with what we claim to be? With what we claim to sing and raise our hands to? Because if I were to pick up a controller, Colton would destroy me. And I'm afraid that a lot of our spirituality is the same way. Here's the other side to authenticity. Not only that it checks out with who it claims to be, but it's real. Certified realness. There's a willingness that comes of authenticity. There's a willingness to take off the mask, James 5:16, but confess your faults one to another and pray for one another. Why? That you may be healed. Somewhere along the line, Satan slipped in this lie to leadership, whether it's parents, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a student minister, it doesn't matter what leadership is, but it slipped in this lie that if I'm going to make an impact into a student's life or into another generation's life, then I got to have it all together. And the only problem with that is that everybody in this room, in your honest moment, in your darkest moment, you know that's not the case. And there's a lot of junk in here that I don't like. I don't know what to do with, and I want to get through it. I want to work through it, but there's a brokenness that's just permeating inside of me, and the gospel needs to step in and redeem some things in my life. But for some reason, we ignore all that, and we say, I'm going to pretend. And so because we can't actually admit the brokenness inside, we put on a mask. And so we show up to church and we raise our hands and we sing, but there's a mask on. The fact is that that is not the gospel. It's ironic that literally the gospel starts with everybody's a bum. Like Jesus hanging on the cross, forever outed every person in this room. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to tiptoe around the fact that you're a sinner and that you have struggles in your life, because Jesus hung on the cross and said, hey, I'm dying for everyone. And so we don't have to pretend. You know what was so beautiful this week? To see so many students take off a mask. And man, I'm just happy-go-lucky guy, but then actually I'm really struggling with this. And then I'm really just kind of this dark and secluded girl, but actually this is who I am, and I'm really fun. And all of these things, they took off the mask and became real. Other generations in this room. Here's the danger if you don't do it. The danger is that the young people that look up to you, whether it's your children, whether it's another person in this room, the people that look up to you, they will create a false impression of who you are. And they'll look at you and you're like, man, I got all these struggles inside of me, but Dad doesn't struggle. And then they're going to work really, really hard to work up to the climate that they think that Dad is at, never realizing that Dad's not there either. And if Dad would just sit down with his son and go, hey, actually, I struggled with that too when I was 14, and I didn't know what to do, and it hurt just the same. How much healing could come from that moment. There's a pastor in Louisville who told the story about how he conducts all of the new member classes in his church, large church. And he said he'd come to him, he said, and the people, a lot of them are new to the faith, and he said, they don't understand. He said, they don't understand the appropriate Christian lingo, like what you're supposed to say and what you're not supposed to say. And so at the start of the session, they always have them introduce, again, as a large church, trying to get to know a couple people. And so he said, they'll stand up, and they don't know any better, because they'll stand up and they'll say, hey, my name is, and I've been sober for. And they'll get up and they'll tell about their addictions to drugs and their gambling problem, and they'll explain in sometimes great detail how the affair blew up their marriage. And the pastor looked at his church and he said, they don't know any better. He said, please don't tell them. It's rare to see people take off a mask. Can I encourage you? Can I exhort you to something? Your student may come to you with something that is incredibly messy and incredibly broken, and you may have everything in you that wants to push away because you've spent your whole life behind the mask, hiding, trying to keep up a false look. Can I tell you, please don't tell them. Don't tell them that that's not what they're supposed to say, because it's not in the Bible. We must be a community that is authentic. We must be a community that is intentional. A community that is intentional. If authenticity is one factor, then intentionality must be another. Look at the verbiage that Paul uses in this text, Titus 2, verse 4. He says that they may teach the young women to be sober. Titus 2, verse 6, young men likewise exhort to be sober-minded. Here's the deal. You don't stumble into teaching or training. It doesn't just happen. Right now, the school is growing unbelievably. And David, I talked to him yesterday about helping with VBS, and he was telling me that this week he's interviewing a couple new teachers. Now, if you know anything about David is pretty cut and dry. I would love to see this scenario happen, but it won't happen. It'd be beautiful. And so here's the thing I thought about. Imagine if David is interviewing these new teachers and he asks them, hey, how do you plan your lessons? How do you get ready to teach? Maybe I think he's hiring a math teacher or something like that. How do you walk through some of those? Imagine if the teacher looked at him and said, you know what? It just kind of happens. I just show up. I kind of stand off in the other room, and like by osmosis, Algebra 2 just implants into their mind. Like it's so stupid, it's comical. I would love to see David's reaction. It would be beautiful. And we can laugh about it, except that's the exact same way we treat biblical Christ-honoring community. And we see exhortations in this Bible that say, hey, listen, elder women, pause, not parents, elder, generations. You don't have to have a child in this room to make an impact in another student or in another life. That's not a qualification, by the way. And so he says, listen, elder women, elder men, he said, you need to step into the lives, intentionally teaching, training, exhorting. It's intentional. It doesn't just happen. Here's the deal. There will be intentionality in your child's life. John 10:10, it's not a verse we have on the screen, but it says, Jesus said, I've come to give you abundant life. He said, but the thief, he's come to steal, kill, and destroy. You don't do any of those things without intention either. There is an enemy. There is an enemy that has a target on your families and on your children, and he wants nothing more than to see them blown up. And he's plotting, he's being very intentional about the way he's pursuing him. And you know what? If you aren't, he will. And we need to be willing to meet people where they are. Camp has got a lot of craziness that happens. We're doing all these crazy games and all this stuff, but I loved, in the midst of it, I sat in the counselors' meeting. They said, you know why we do all that? Breaks down walls. And Dad, maybe you've been trying to get that spiritual nugget in there for so long that it's actually become a root of bitterness in your child. Maybe the best thing to do is the next time to say, hey, can we see that movie? Yeah, we can go, because that actually would be intentionally pursuing your child's heart. Maybe that's a better idea. We need to become willing to meet our kids where we're at. We don't do this in any other thing. We don't expect a fourth grader to show up already having completed fifth grade, but yet we come to students and we go, hey, listen, I expect you to be here, and when they're not, we're disappointed in them. No, we missed it. We need to be willing to step into where people are in that moment. Isn't this what Jesus did? I mean, look at the life of the Apostle Peter or David or Mary Magdalene or Roger Campbell, and you see people where Jesus stepped in and said, oh, I love you. I love you right where you're at, and I want to take you on a journey together. Here's the other thing that being intentional requires. It requires that you actually have a reservoir of truth to pull from. I used this illustration from the teenagers this week. Imagine if someone came up to me. We took 3 of the church vans to camp. Imagine if someone came up to me and said, hey, I got a big need. I got a van that I really need. At that moment, I would not have the right or the responsibility to give them one of the church vans. I'd probably get fired, and that'd be bad because I couldn't eat, and I like to eat. So I couldn't give them a church van. There'd be no problem with me giving them my Honda. Why? Because if you look on the title of my beautiful 2008 manual Honda Fit, it says Roger Campbell. I own it. You know why you really struggle giving love to crazy teenagers? You may not own it. You want to know why you can't seem to help another person, whether it's a teenager or an older person, appropriate the gospel in all of its magnitude? Is because in your soul you might not have appropriated it yourself. Intentionality assumes that we have a reservoir to draw from. Community must be authentic, it must be intentional, it must be biblical. Must be biblical. This almost goes without saying. I have a very special relationship with camp. One of my first memories of camp, I went to camp as a fourth grader, I think, 4th or 5th grade. I went to camp as a junior camp. I don't know if I ever want to do junior camp. I haven't made that step of faith in my life yet, but we'll see. I don't know, maybe. That's a lot of pressure to take a lot of small, screaming children who really haven't developed that logic sense yet. I don't know if I want to do that. But I went to junior camp. And in my little junior camp community, I thought it would be an amazing idea not to shower the entire week. And so I thought, I'm going to the swimming hole. There's a lot of vigorous water washing around my body. They put chemicals, I think, in the swimming hole. Who knows? I don't know. And so the whole week, all the activities, all the games. If you know me anything about me, I don't really do anything halfway. Like I just kind of like, if I'm going to play watermelon rugby, I'm going to truck a small child. It's going to happen. I don't know. I just kind of go for it. And so here I am as a little 4th grade, 5th grade Roger, and I'm going nuts. We're sweating, having a good time. And at the end of the week, I went home. True story. I literally had a blistery rash that covered my entire body from the grime that I experienced. I literally had to take antibiotics for the next 2 weeks to get this rash to go away. Disgusting. You see why I don't want to take juniors to camp? This is why, right here. But wait. My community, my little 4th and 5th grade community, they didn't have a problem with it. Nobody in that group said, hey, you stink and you're grimy. That's nasty. No one said that. It was only when I came home and I hit the truth. Where my parents and my mom, and if you want to think about my parents, my dad's a doctor, he was like, what have you done? I'm afraid too often our community's not biblical. When I was thinking about this, here's my concern. I'm not so much concerned with like the big things. Like if someone in this community were to stand up and be like, hey, we need to just shoot people in the face. Like hopefully there was someone to be like, I don't know about that one. Like if someone stood up and said like, hey, meth's the way to go, like that, I'm going to guess there's going to be a majority in this community that's going to go, I got a flag on the play. Like that's not going to work. Here's what I'm more concerned about. I'm trying to think of an illustration. So, and babe, it's the time. The illustration's coming out. This is great. So when we were on our honeymoon, we were down in Cancun doing a lot of swimming, doing a lot of different things, and every night we go to supper, had all these restaurants you could choose from, and Joe was getting ready. Of course, I got ready in like 30 seconds because I'm a guy, and so here's Joe, and she's getting ready, and she comes out, and normally that's the only way I'd seen Joe's hair was how it is right now. It's kind of straightened and curled, and I didn't realize when it got wet, it kind of changes, and I realized that whole changed factor there with the water. And so here's Joe. She comes out. She's kind of scrunches her hair, ladies, and she's kind of doing this thing. And she's like, man, that looks good. And she comes out. And here's what her 3-day-old husband looked at her and said, hey, babe, with all sincerity and kindness and tenderness in my heart, I looked at her, hey, babe, we got time if you want to do your hair. I wish there was a part of that story that I'm making up, but that's completely true. It's completely true. Now, how many of you in that moment thought that my wife looked at me and go, he's so sweet. He's so patient. No. I will never live that down. Literally, I can tell that story 50 years from tonight, and it will still just be as painful and just as funny. Now, here's the deal. My intention in that moment, in all honesty, was that I wasn't trying to rush her. And that I really did say, hey, if she was, I'd only seen her hair one way, and if she wanted to do her hair that way, I was not in a rush. We could have waited. I wasn't trying. In that moment, it wasn't a thing, wow, she's ugly right now. I didn't think that at all. None of that. Here's where I think the danger, when we don't found our community on truth. Dad, you can look at your son and you're like, hey, you got to make something out of yourself. I don't know why I just did the Ivan voice there, but it was cool. Tie-dye night, yeah. Sorry. And Dad, you can look at him and you say, hey, you better be successful and you better get a degree and you better have a good job and you better make a lot of money. And I'm going to look at you and go, Dad, where is that in there? I'm not against any of those things. They're all good things, but only when run through this filter. And kids, it goes the other way too. You can look at each other and go, my parents just don't understand me. It may be true, but run it through the filter of the Word of God that says, but you have to submit and obey anyways. We have got to be a community that founds itself upon truth, because it's not, you may say things that have good intentions and crumble the foundation of truth in your student. We have to be a community that is biblical. I loved what the speaker on the last night said. He got up and he goes, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He said, you get enough of this stuff that tells you that if you follow Jesus, it's going to be all good, and it's going to be all roses, it's going to be all fun. He said, that's not the case. He said, did you see the men that followed Jesus in the Bible? They all died. All of them. Like died in really bad ways. And he called our students, he said, Jesus wants all of you, and it doesn't matter what it costs. Truth. Truth. Quickly. Community must be authentic, intentional, biblical. Community must be together. Literally, if I would have said this with the definition I gave you, this would have been community must be community, but that would have been redundant. I didn't want to say that. So community must be together. There's derivatives that come from word. One of the derivatives that comes from the word community is ecology. Ecology. And so ecology is where there's an interdependence on different animals a lot of times, or climates or vegetation. A coral reef would be a great depiction of ecology, where the reef kind of depends on the fish, and the fish depend on the reef, and they feed off of these things, and it all works together. This is the picture that Paul is giving to the church as what our community looks like. A community that is together. What's that look like? That looks like being willing to walk the journey. Literally, the camp name this week was called Journey Camp. Imagine if we began to approach our relationships in this community under that label, a journey. And being willing to go, hey, I'm going to walk with you. Amos 3:3 is a famous verse that we talk about. We say, can two walk together except they be agreed? And we spend a lot of time right here going, hey, make sure we're agreed, make sure we agreed. And we miss that the whole point is that we're walking together. I don't know how many times this week that I heard a student sitting on the floor and going, hey, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one who struggled with depression or suicidal thoughts or some secret sin, all these things. And imagine if we became a community that surrounded each other and walked the journey together. Literally, one of our students said this week, she said, we'd change the whole community. We'd change the whole county. She gets it. We get so concerned with fixing someone. And so we see all the junk in our life, and we see all the problems in someone else, and we go, okay, well, I got to fix their problems. The only deal is, that's not what Jesus called you to do. Literally, the lawyer came to Jesus, and he says, hey, what's the greatest commandment? What's the one? He didn't show up and go, hey, go fix everybody that has a problem. He says, hey, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. You know what that sounds like to me? Hey, where are you at on the journey? I want to walk. Let's go. I want to walk the journey with you. Oh, you're right here? Okay, I'll come back here and we'll walk back here. It's not excusing sin. Jesus never excused sin. It's not lowering a standard. It's being willing to go, hey, I want to come with you. I want to be with you in this struggle. I want to cry with you. I want to understand what it's like to be a teenager in a generation, in a society that is incredibly oppressive upon their spirituality. I want to walk with you. I want to walk with you. It also looks like mutual accountability. If we're going to be together in this, mutual accountability. Literally, Paul is sowing out different things for elder generations, for younger generations. Hey, listen, this is what it looks like to follow Christ. And imagine if together, around the gospel, with that as the theme, if we said, hey, how you doing? Hey, Dad, I don't know if you should have said that to Mom. And Dad not fly off at the handle when he's encountered with truth. A student who lets a parent go, hey, listen, I see this in your life and I love you enough to say something. Mutual accountability. This goes both ways. What about this one? Celebrating one another. It's one of the things I told the parents when we came home from camp. I said, you must celebrate the wins no matter how small. Because what we do on this journey, we have an expectation of how fast you need to walk and where we're going to go and what turns we're going to take along the journey. The problem is you don't get to control those type of expectations. And so my suggestion would be to set down those expectations and pick up encouragement. Because for some of the students that went with us this week, the win was that they were very vulnerable and very open and had great victory in their life. For other students, the win is that they stepped foot on the van. And both should be encouraged with utmost vigor. Because we're walking a journey. We're walking a journey. It's funny how much we get a competitive mindset when it comes to our spiritual growth. And we feel like as a leader, I feel this way, as a leader, if I see a student or see someone younger than me that kind of has it, when I feel like more together than me at that moment, like I kind of feel like I kind of have to assert myself again and kind of, what if we just celebrated? When we were playing that stupid watermelon rugby game, I'm going to guess that Jalen did a lot better job than I did. Let's just be real. Like, Jalen's a lot stronger. He can truck people with a lot more force than I can. But you know what? When Jalen scored, we all cheered. What if we became a community that no matter how small, cheered? Community must be authentic, intentional, biblical, together. Last point, we'll finish. Community must be generational. Generational. Look what Paul is talking about in this passage. He says, elder women, you teach this to younger women, and elder men, you step into the lives of younger men. Look, he's literally describing a generational community. You know what would be an amazing goal for this church? Is to see the generations unite around a common theme. I'm done. I'm done with this thinking that says, well, teenagers, they just don't understand. You know what? You can think that if you want, and you can write them off as a social media selfie generation if you want, but I'm not willing to do that. And what the better idea would be like, you know what? I don't understand why their music, I don't understand why they dance so much, and they're always on their little gadgets. You don't have to understand it. But you can unite around the gospel and love them. And students, I'll say the same thing to you. You may look at your parents and you're like, you don't understand. You really can't even spell Instagram. It doesn't matter. We can come together around the gospel. Why? Why? Look at this verse. Psalm 145, verse 4. It's beautiful. It says, one generation shall praise thy works to another, and shall declare thy mighty acts. You know what will change this community? Community. If we want to segment into different generations and different cliques with age groups, and while I understand this because we're the greatest generation, and I understand this because we're kind of middle-aged and we got family and kids, and you don't understand that, and they're kids themselves, and they're whatever, we can do that. Or we can have one generation praise the works to another. Here's what's so crazy. I want you to hear this. This is how Paul ends this passage. Titus 2, verse 10. Why is this community so important? Because this is the gospel. Let me show you. Titus 2, verse 10, he said, for the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men, all communities, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world, looking to that blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. Folks, this is the gospel. Do you understand this? The gospel is the most authentic thing you can ever imagine. It's real. It is certified with the very blood of Jesus Christ. It is authentic, and it is the foundation for community. The gospel is the most intentional act that ever happened in mankind. Literally, Jesus saw broken, damaged people, and he says, I love you so much, I'll die for you. Intentional. It's biblical. Unless you believe another gospel, it's biblical. There's nothing more biblical than the gospel, that Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. He's the goal. He's the prize. Run towards him. The gospel's together. Literally, the wages of sin is death, separation, breaking apart. And the gospel says, no, I bring it back together. I bring you back to community with God and one another. The gospel is together. Friends, can I tell you the gospel is generational? The gospel doesn't care if you're old or young or middle-aged, you got kids, you don't have kids. It doesn't matter if you're single or married. It doesn't matter. It pulls them all together. 4 days. We were at camp 4 days. At camp, they talk all the time about a camp high, where you get on this mountaintop experience and you experience all this stuff, and then you come home. And I know what they're trying to do. They're telling the kids, like, when you get home, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be harder, but why does it have to be? Why does it have to change when we come home from camp? What if we stepped into a community as a church that is authentic, intentional, biblical, together, and generational? Will you pray with me? Father, we need you in this moment. Lord, you don't want camp experience to be just for students or just for a 4-day moment. We want it to be for a lifetime in this place. And God, I pray that you would call families today. I pray that you would call students and elders and all different generations today under your truth that is authentic and intentional and biblical and together and generational. Lord, that is the type of community that you're calling us to. That's it. And it is founded upon the gospel alone. Lord, help us get it. Bless these people, I pray. Do a work from your word. In your name.